Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
You probably picture a drone, just as this cool gadget for snapping photos from up high. But here's something wild, right from the sources. In Canada, the second even a tiny drone, like less than 250 grams, lifts off, it's legally an aircraft.
Yeah, that surprises a lot of people.
It means you, the person flying it, could technically fall into the exact same Aeronautics Act rules as someone piloting a jumbo jet.
It's serious stuff.
Pretty eye-opening. So today, we're doing a deep dive into, the really crucial and honestly often changing world of Canadian drone air law. Using the material we've got, our mission is basically to walk you through the history, get a handle on the current rules and what you need to do, and maybe peek at where flying these RPAS remotely piloted aircraft systems is going in Canada. Think of it as your essential guide.
And it's definitely more than just ticking boxes. Fundamentally, it's about safety. How do we fit these things into the sky everyone shares? It touches on privacy, managing risks, and, operating like a professional next to helicopters, planes, everything. Understanding these rules is really what sets apart, say, a pro operator from someone just flying casually.
Exactly. So we'll look back at how things used to be, kind of the Wild West phase, some called it. Then we'll unpack the big rule changes, look at the tools you actually need, work through some real-life flight examples to see how it plays out, and then, look ahead a bit. So let's start there. To get where we are now, we need to look back. What was it like flying drones in Canada before 2019?
Well, it was. Let's just say it was pretty bureaucratic. But interestingly, Canada was actually quite forward-thinking early on. They set up a formal system, the Special Flight Operations Certificate, or SFOC, even before the U.S. got their Part 107 rules going.
Right. And the sources mentioned the very first commercial SFOC was issued way back in 2007.
That's right, 2007. Hard to believe, It was for, I think, an aerial film shoot out in BC. This was long before drones were everywhere. But while it was innovative, that SFOC system just got swamped. Transport Canada was trying to handle something like over 5,000 applications a year. The paperwork was a lot.
Well, 5,000 a year.
Yeah.
That sounds like a massive bottleneck if you wanted to fly commercially. What if you weren't getting an SFOC?
Well, that's where a lot of the confusion came in. Drones were often sort of shoehorned into these old, 1970s rules meant for actual model airplanes. The big problem was many operators, whether commercial or not, kind of misunderstood that model aircraft exemption. They thought it covered them for complex flights or make money when it absolutely didn't. So a lot of flying was happening, frankly, outside the law, maybe without people even realizing it.
So that lack of clear rules, plus the burden of getting an SFOC, it basically slowed down the industry and led to a lot of accidental illegal flying.
Precisely. It was really hard for businesses to grow, to plan things out, or even just be sure they were flying legally. And it was tough for Transport Canada to manage too.
Okay, which brings us to the big turning point, the game changer.
The game changer was absolutely 2019. That's when the new regulations came in SHOR 2019-11, introducing Part 9 into the Canadian Aviation Regulations, the CARs.
Part 9X is where we get rules specifically for drones.
Exactly. It finally created a dedicated legal framework just for RPAS, and critically, it split operations into two main categories, basic and advanced. This was huge because suddenly there were clear standard rules for lots of common flights that used to need that slow SFOC process.
Right.
Like most flights in Class G airspace that's uncontrolled airspace became legal if you had the right basic certificate. And for the more complex stuff like flying in controlled airspace or operating nearer to people, Part 9X laid out a standard path.
Yes.
You needed authorization plus the advanced certificate.
And getting that advanced certificate involved a practical test, the flight review, didn't it, to sort of professionalize the pilots.
Yes, exactly. A formal flight review became mandatory. It checks both your knowledge of the rules and, importantly, your actual flying skills in a real-world type setting. The knowledge part even pulls from training for manned pilots, like glider pilots.
So what happened then? The sources say the industry exploded. That's a strong word.
It really did take off. All of a sudden, common commercial work, things like aerial surveys, bridge inspections, real estate photography, checking power lines became way more practical and scalable. Operators finally had clear rules to follow for a lot of their standard day-to-day flying without the SFOC bottleneck for everything.
Okay, so we have drone rules now, SARS Part 9. But the sky's complex, right? Different zones. How do you figure out where you can fly legally?
Yeah, you need to understand the layers. Think of the main Canadian Aviation Regulations, the CARs, as the rule book for everyone flying. Part 9X is your specific chapter for drones. But, and this is really important, the sources stress this, CARs Part 6, which covers general flight rules for all aircraft. That still applies to you flying a drone, unless Part 9X says something different.
So basic stuff like see and avoid other aircraft, operate safely, who has right of way. Right. Those still apply to drones.
Absolutely. You're sharing that airspace. Safety basics are universal. Now, the air itself is divided up. You've got controlled airspace. That's usually Class C, D, or E near airports. Then you've got restricted airspace, Class F, and prohibited airspace.
Okay, say I need to fly in controlled airspace for a job.
For any advanced operation or commercial work in controlled airspace, you absolutely need your Advanced RPAS Pilot Certificate, and you need specific permission authorization from NAV Canada.
And this is where it gets tricky, maybe counterintuitive for some people. We think of controlled airspace as being way up high.
Exactly. That's a big misconception. Especially Class C airspace around major airports. It often goes right down to the ground, extending out for miles, so that Class G, uncontrolled airspace below 400 feet you might be used to, it can just disappear near an airport. And you also have to watch out for Class E, which can also start right at the surface in some spots, often around airports for instrument approaches, but now very relevant for drones too.
So you can't just assume. You have to check your charts or use a tool. What about that restricted airspace, Class F?
Class F restricted means just that, restricted. You absolutely must get permission directly from whoever controls that airspace. Often it's the Department of National Defense, the military, before you can even think about flying there.
And prohibited?
Prohibited is pretty much a definite no-fly zone. Getting an SFOC for prohibited airspace is, according to the sources, extremely rare. Think Parliament Hill, prisons, that sort of thing.
Getting these permissions, especially from NAV Canada, used to mean emails, phone calls, maybe waiting days or weeks.
Yeah, that was part of the old bottleneck. But now there's NAV Drone. The sources highlight it as a really impressive world-class automated system for requesting that controlled airspace authorization. It's modeled on systems in places like Australia and Singapore. It's a massive improvement, often giving you automated or much faster responses.
Okay, so Part 9X covers a lot. NAV Drone helps with controlled airspace.
Yeah.
When do you still need that old SFOC?
Right. The SFOC isn't gone. It's just reserved now for operations that fall outside the standard rules in Part 9X. Think flying over big crowds, like that concert example, or genuine beyond visual line of sight BVLOS where you can't physically see the drone. Flying at night, unless you have specific authorization otherwise, perhaps through NEV Canada for certain scenarios now, or flying near an active emergency scene like a fire or accident. If your plan doesn't fit the basic or advanced boxes, you'll likely need an SFOC.
Got it. That clears up the overall structure.
Yeah.
Now let's shift to the pilot. What are my direct responsibilities as the operator?
Okay, number one, registration. Your drone itself has to be registered with Transport Canada. And that registration number, it must be clearly marked right on the drone. And the sources make a point. This even applies to those little microdrones under 250 grams if you're using them for commercial work or flying advanced operations like in controlled airspace.
Okay, registered and marked. What about keeping the drone in good shape? Maintenance.
Absolutely required. You need to follow what the manufacturer recommends and the rules in the cars. That means doing checks before every single flight and doing regular maintenance depending on how much you fly. And speaking of before every flight, maybe the most critical step is the site assessment. You must do one before you fly. Every time.
What does that actually involve, a site assessment?
It's basically your pre-flight safety check of the location. You're looking for hazards, power lines, buildings, trees. You're confirming the airspace class using NAV drone, charts, checking NOTAMs for any temporary restrictions. You're thinking about privacy for people nearby, identifying obstacles. It's your essential ground check before launching.
And who's ultimately responsible for the whole flight?
That's always the pilot in command, the PIC. Even if you have visual observers or other crew helping, the PIC has the final say and responsibility for safety. And anyone helping you needs to be briefed on their role, what to watch for, and emergency plans.
We touched on the flight review for the advanced certificate earlier. Sounds like a key responsibility to prepare for and pass.
It is. It's a practical, hands-on evaluation. A qualified flight reviewer watches you operate the drone and asks questions to make sure you can apply your knowledge safely in a realistic situation. It's not just book smarts, it's showing you can actually fly competently and make good decisions. Requires at least 2 people, you and the reviewer.
So putting it all together, registration, maintenance, the site assessment, knowing who's PIC, having the right certificate, this all feeds into your flight planning.
Exactly. Proper flight planning is mandatory, especially for professional operations. It means doing and documenting that site assessment, doing your airspace checks, NAV drone, VNC charts, NOTAMs, checking the weather forecast, briefing your crew, making sure your drone and batteries are ready. It's all about documented preparation and thinking through the risks.
Let's drill down into some specific flight rules, the limitations. Maybe the most fundamental is visual line of sight, VLOS.
VLOS is absolutely key under Part 9s. The sources are very clear. You have to be able to see your drone directly with your own eyes without help at all times. Now, wearing your regular glasses or contacts is fine, but you can't use binoculars or rely only on the camera feed on your screen, your FPV view, as your main way of seeing and controlling the drone. Direct visual contact is required, unless you have that specific SFOC for something like BVLOS.
And standard flying is during the day only.
Correct. Part 9X baseline is daylight operations. Flying at night needs specific permission either through an SFOC or potentially through NAV Canada authorization for certain advanced scenarios now.
And in that shared sky, what about right away?
Manned aircraft planes, helicopters always have priority. No exceptions. If you see or hear one approaching, you must immediately give way. That usually means landing your drone quickly or moving it down and away from their path.
What about flying near people or busy roads?
Under the standard Part 9X rules, you cannot fly directly over big crowds of people. You also can't fly right over an active highway or busy street unless maybe the road is officially closed and you have permission. And you need to keep a safe distance horizontally from moving cars too. Don't want to distract drivers or pose a risk.
Okay, beyond just flying the drone, there are these other big areas: privacy, liability, and enforcement.
Hugely important points. As a drone pilot, especially if you're taking photos or video, you must follow Canada's privacy laws. It's not actually a separate set of drone privacy rules. It's the existing legislation, like PEPITA, that governs how anyone collects, uses, or shares personal information.
There was that incident in Toronto mentioned in the sources that relates to this.
Yes, a significant early case. It basically established that flying a drone in a way that intrudes on someone's reasonable expectation of privacy, like hovering outside a window, filming people in their backyard without permission, that violates privacy law. You have to be really conscious of not capturing identifiable people in private settings without their consent.
So what happens if someone breaks these rules, the cars? Are there real consequences?
Oh, definitely. The stakes are high. Transport Canada is the regulator, and they are actively enforcing these rules now. Breaking the cars can lead to serious penalties. We're talking hefty fines, getting your pilot certificate suspended or even taken away permanently. And in really serious cases, you could face criminal charges under the Aeronautics Act, remember? The same act that applies to airline pilots.
And Transport Canada is doing audits, you said.
Yes, they are actively auditing RPAS operators. They want to see that professionalism, that compliance.
Which leads directly to record keeping. It's not just good practice, it's required.
Absolutely mandatory. The sources hammer this home. You are legally required to keep detailed logs. Logs of your drone maintenance, your site assessments for each flight location, records of every flight you conduct, details of any incidents or accidents, and copies of all your authorizations like NAV Canada clearances or SFOCs. And you must provide these records to Transport Canada if they ask.
Okay, that's a complex web of rules. Let's try to make it concrete. Walk me through one of those real-world examples from the sources. Say, you need to inspect a building near a hospital. It's definitely in Class C airspace. How do you tackle that?
Okay, good one. First thought, airspace. Class C. That immediately tells you. Need advanced certificate and NAV Canada authorization via NAV drone. No question. Second, site assessment. Crucial here. Near a hospital. Big flag for potential helicopter traffic. So check NOTAMs specifically for heliport activity, landing pads. Assess the building itself height, potential radio interference, obstacles. Make sure you can keep VLOS, which might be tricky on a tall building. You're applying all the standard Part 9X sensor rules, keep clear of aircraft, especially Helis, and document everything you're planned, the authorization, the flight log.
Okay, different scenario. Filming a big outdoor concert. thousands of people below.
Okay, that one's different. That immediately hits a major restriction in standard Part 9X.
Yeah.
You just cannot fly directly over large assemblies of people or crowds with just a basic or advanced certificate, even if it's Class G airspace.
So you can't take that job with your standard advanced certificate.
Nope, absolutely not under the standard rules. Filming that concert over that many people, that is a classic example of an operation requiring an SFOC. That's exactly the kind of higher risk, non-standard flight the SFOC process is designed for now.
What about this one? It tricks people up. You've got a tiny drone, under 250 grams.
Yeah.
Can you just fly it in controlled airspace near an airport without worrying?
Right. This is a super common misconception the sources highlight. Being under 250 grams does exempt it from certain specific Part 9X requirements, like needing a pilot certificate for purely recreational flying in Class G. However, if you're flying it commercially, or if you want to fly it into controlled airspace Class C, D, or E, other rules kick in, you still need NV Canada authorization to enter controlled airspace, even with that microdrone. You must also follow the general Part 6 rules, like yielding to manned aircraft and flying safely. And if it is commercial, or you're doing an advanced operation like flying in controlled space, the sources indicate you likely still need the appropriate certificate and must follow the relevant Part 9X operational rules, too.
Okay.
So what you see in all these examples is a core logic, right? You're always asking, what's the airspace? What permissions do I need? Is my certificate level correct? Does my equipment, crew, and plan meet CAR's Part 9X and Part 6? Did I do a thorough site assessment? Am I respecting privacy? And is all my compliance documented?
That's a really useful framework. So things have changed a lot already. How is the system evolving right now, say, between 2020 and now 2025, and what's maybe coming next?
Yeah, it's definitely not static. NAV drone automation was a massive step forward, and it's up and running. The SFOC process, as we said, is more focused now on the truly complex or higher risk stuff. We're also seeing Canada aligning more with international standards. Things like SORA, that's the Specific Operations Risk Assessment Methodology, are starting to shape how SFOCs are looked at. It helps align us with how Europe, ESA, and ICAO approach risk assessment for drone flights.
And you mentioned enforcement is ramping up.
Yeah, the sources are clear. Transport Canada is actively auditing. They're looking for that documented proof of compliance, that professional approach. Record keeping is definitely not optional anymore. Looking ahead, what's next? Probably even more automation and capability in NAV drone. Continued streamlining of the SFOC process, likely more formally tied to SORA principles. Maybe the flight review evolving to put even more emphasis on pilot judgment and decision-making in complex situations.
And the sources hint at a potential rule updates, maybe around 2026. Things like remote ID.
That's definitely being discussed. Remote ID is on the table globally. There's also talk about possibly refining weight categories, maybe clearer rules for flying near people versus over them, same for vehicles. And, importantly, there's a strong chance the advanced certificate itself could expand its privileges. Maybe covering things like extended visual line of sight EVLS, where you use visual observers, or even some types of light beyond visual line of sight BVLS operations. But that would definitely come with extra training requirements. Night flying might also become a standard privilege with the advanced certificate, assuming you demonstrate competency, rather than needing separate permission each time. The big picture, based on the sources, seems to be greater integration, fitting drones more seamlessly into the overall aviation system, what people call UTM or unmanned traffic management. Transport Canada appears to want advanced RPAS pilots to be seen and to act like professional aviators. That means robust planning, documented risk management, and being ready for those compliance checks.
Okay, so if we trace the timeline, we went from the old kind of clunky SOC-only world, then the massive Part 9X shift in 2019, then NEV drone brought automation. Now we're in an era focused on solid record keeping and privacy awareness, and the future looks like more SOAR alignment and eventually maybe more BVLS integration.
That's a really good summary of the journey and where we seem to be heading. So if we boil it all down, the absolute must-knows from everything we've covered. CAR's Part 9X and Part 6 apply. Controlled airspace. Needs advanced cert plus Navy Canada auth. Restricted. Need permission from the controller. Prohibited. Basically no fly. Your drone needs registration marked clearly. Site assessment. Every single time. VLOS. Unaided eyes only. Daylight flights are standard. Night needs authorization. Privacy laws matter. Penalties. They're real fines. Losing your certificate. Even criminal charges. Transport Canada enforces this and they are auditing. And records. Mandatory. Keep them meticulous.
There's still a lot to juggle, but you mentioned a great mnemonic from those sources, Space A, to help keep it straight.
Yeah, Space E. It's a fantastic mental checklist before pretty much any flight. S, site assessment, did I check the location thoroughly? P, permissions, do I have a Navi Canada clearance? And SFOC, if needed, landowner permission. Airspace class. Do I know exactly where I am and its rules? C, certificate level. Is my certificate appropriate for the specific flight? E, equipment and crew compliance. Is my drone airworthy? Batteries charged? Crew briefed? And the final C, compliance. Am I covering privacy? Have I done my record keeping? Am I following all the other CARS rules? Run through Space C, and you've covered your main bases.
Fantastic. Well, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today, navigating through the essential, sometimes complex landscape of Canadian drone air law, from those early days right up to what might be coming next.
And understanding this stuff, it really isn't just about passing an exam. It's about operating safely, legally, and with professionalism. It's about protecting yourself, your investment, and everyone else using the airspace.
Couldn't agree more. So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over from our deep dive today. Consider how this ongoing push for more automation, like NAV drone getting smarter, and the drive for closer integration with traditional manned aircraft, that whole UTM concept, how is that going to fundamentally change the sky you fly in? What new responsibilities and maybe what new opportunities do you see emerging for RPS pilots like yourself in the coming years because of that evolution? What new questions does that bring up for you?
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.